Today's episode is brought to you by MyPhysio. That's spelled M-I Physio. Visit their website myphysio.co.nz and get in touch to get telehealth services during lockdown. They also have 3 locations in Auckland, in Te Atatū, Manukau and Otahu. So if you haven't been doing your virtual yoga, virtual Pilates, or just getting a stretch when you need to and having issues with your body, then MyPhysio is here to help you sort those out. They offer rehab, remedies for sports injuries, prevention plans, and even acupuncture. Get in touch with the great team at MyPhysio and let them help you. Let MyPhysio be your physio.
Pula Vinaka.
Hello everyone, I'm really excited by today's guest because he is one of a kind, literally. The only professional football player in history to have won the Super Bowl with the St. Louis Rams in 2000, the Grey Cup, which is the Canadian Football League, with the BC Lions in 2006, and the XFL with the Los Angeles Extreme, a league that was around for 1 year, concepted by Vince McMahon from the WWE. On top of that, he's a huge proponent of giving back to the community and has been part of the Richmond School Board in Vancouver, Canada, where he lives with his family, and also been a part of the Boys and Girls Club of Canada. On top of that, he's been the president of SPS Facility Services, which is a company that provides commercial cleaning services. A role model, a great guy to talk to, and an amazing career. Today's guest is Bobby Singh.
Bobby, so great to have you today on the podcast. I'm really excited to speak to you. This is amazing having you on. Such a pleasure. You got such an interesting career and history, and I am so excited to get into that. But I wanted to start off with talking about your connection to Fiji. And I know you left there when you were 1.5 years old, so you might not have any memories. But have you been back, or do you have any memories of Fiji?
No, I mean, pictures. That's about it. But, I was born there, and then we moved to Calgary, Vancouver and sort of Calgary, I think in 76 or 77. So I was a year and a half. I went back with my mom because I think she was homesick, but I don't remember that. And then that was the last time. So obviously I still have a lot of family there, and a lot of, my parents tell me lots of stories about back home, but my kids are older now, so we sort of are planning to go back, but it's, we have pets, and, trying to organize all that. It's a challenge in itself. So one of these days we'll get back to the mother.
For sure. Whereabouts in Fiji were your parents from?
Ba. I was born in Ba.
Oh God. Yeah. Right.
That's all I know.
Yeah. It's a small town. I mean, you're going to have a great time when you go back. It's going to be very different.
It's going to be different regardless for me, because I mean, what do I really know except for the old pictures, right?
Yeah, totally. And are your kids excited about it?
Definitely. Yeah, well, they're excited about any trip. So my wife's from Scotland, so we were sort of saying we got to go back to both motherlands. So we're planning that, and obviously this COVID stuff has put a damper on a lot of plans. But it's nice to have everybody under the same roof and sort of just spending some quality time instead of everyone just busy, right?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of bonding time right now.
100%.
One of the things that I was really fascinated about, especially in your profile and why I reached out, apart from your amazing career, is that you were such a trailblazer, in the sense that, playing a sport where there's no one that looks like you or with the same background as you, let alone get to the pinnacle of that sport. In my mind, there'd be like self-doubt, there'll be social pressure to go down a different path, coming from a family like that. Did you ever feel like an outsider?
Not really. I just ignored it. I think if you want to be successful in anything, it's the same mindset, right? It's just you got to be focused and ignore all the haters, as they say. But growing up in Vancouver, we had a bunch of brown guys, Asian guys that played football. So it wasn't different for me. And I just did the same thing no matter what I played in or whatever I did. I competed hard. So wasn't really any different from me. I think, if I was in Fiji, I'd probably just substitute with rugby maybe. So that was, football is popular here, basketball, hockey. So, and I think it's, back then, there wasn't as many, Browns, Asians playing. But now, like if you look at all the sports, you had everybody playing. So it was sort of a microcosm of what our Vancouver became. But it wasn't that bad. I mean, I had older brothers that already played too, so it was sort of, they broke the ice. I got into it, and that's just what we did.
You mentioned your brothers. You had older brothers who you played with growing up, and that always helps. And on that subject, I was going to ask you: did you have any mentors growing up?
Yeah, I mean, obviously my brothers. They obviously beat up on me when I was a kid, but made me stronger. And obviously my father. Coming. I think it's unbelievable for someone to come to a foreign land and then just start from scratch. I was lucky. He paved the way, and my mom too. And we're doing the easy part, go to school and all that's easy. Just imagine if you had to lift up on your own and do that stuff. So I admire him probably the most. And my mom, the most, to just get up and leave and have the, I don't want to say balls, but have the strength to do that. It's unbelievable. So that's probably my biggest mentor. I think, it's unbelievable. Like for me, I went to the University of Hawaii, and I left Vancouver and went there, and I thought that was a big deal. But then I had a scholarship. I played football. I played a sport, and got paid for it basically. His was, livelihood. It was, I got to raise my kids here. I got to go start a new life. And I think, families or parents that have done that my hats are way off to them more than anybody that plays sports or any of the stuff that we call fun.
Wow, that's amazing that you can speak to that gratitude. That's really powerful. Yes, you're right. I think it's like a trait that a lot of Fijian families have. If you look at the history through the generations, a lot of the Fijian Indians that came through with the labor system back in the early 1900s, and then a lot of those parents and grandparents really emphasize education and opportunity for their subsequent kids and grandkids, and that's really something that's really borne out. And I love that you can speak to the gratitude that you have for your parents, and I love that they are mentors that loom large for you. That's awesome. You mentioned your parents did so much. What kind of things did they hustle with to get their feet on the ground in Canada?
It was, my dad got into real estate too, but he also worked, like he was into fiberglass, and so like obviously jobs that Canadians didn't really want. It was like he got into fiberglass and welding, and he pretty much had that job till he retired. So he worked hard and then got into real estate. That's what I love about him too, is we flipped out. Like I lived in a bunch of houses, which is something I've done too. Is he sort of. I'm used to sort of moving around. My wife wasn't. My wife grew up in the same house, all the way to high school. And I think I was in like 10 or so. So it's like, we just built and then sold and built and sold them. But that's how that's how I felt like you got ahead. And, I learned that from my father. So, aside from just working hard at the mill or at the steel plant or whatever he worked at, Wexler Packaging was called. He also, started developing and building on the side. And I sort of got that from him as well. So, I was lucky that he had, I think, 2 jobs, and then the metalwork one is the one where he retired.
Sounds like a real theme of hard work and perseverance. And doing some research on the kinds of things you do in the community to help youth, and, being a board on the school board, and being a mentor yourself. It seems like there's a lot of hard work and persistence, perseverance, values and themes that come out of that. How do you think about mentorship from your side, now that you've also been in that position?
I think you got to practice what you preach. I've been around a lot of guys that, would be out maybe partying or smoke weed and then talk about anti-drugs and more power to them, because I see that they're trying to help the kids out and do this, but it's, it's almost hypocritical. Yeah. So I've sort of been practice what you preach. It was, I don't want to get too deep, but you know, you know, I went through some things in life that were tough, and you know, it's you know, I just believe you got to practice what you preach.
Totally, yeah. It's you have to model that behavior to lead from the front, right?
Yeah, totally.
And it sounds like you had that with your dad and your parents, and then you're modeling that behavior yourself. With the volunteer and community work you do an amazing amount of it. You've been on the board of Richmond School, active spokesman for Boys and Girls Club of Canada, and various youth programs such as Downset Hut Football Camp. What drew you to community and volunteer work in the first place?
I don't know. You know what? It was just something I always wanted to do. You know, I felt like we didn't have enough growing up, and I always said if I was in a position to do something like that when I got older, then that was something I'd do. So the Boys and Girls Club, you know, when I played for the Lions, I had a friend that actually, you know, he's with a different foundation now, but we grew up together, and you know, he got me involved. And so that was sort of my connection there. And then, you know, any of the other foundations that, you know, people just approached me, and if I had the time, you know, I definitely was involved. You know, it's different when you play, you know, and you're involved. You know, the kids, you know, I like to be more on like the hands on. Like when I played, it was different because, you know, the kids looked up to you. They got to watch you on TV. Nowadays, I sort of do, you know, more behind the scenes work, you know, in Richmond, you know, I still stay involved with a lot of groups, but not as much as when I played, but, you know, I give back where I can. Awesome.
It seems like you get a real kick out of it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's, you know, it's, it's hard to describe. It's like, it's a good feeling inside. And, you know, I've done it so many years that you just get used to it. And it's, you know, my wife, the funny thing is my wife is probably does more than I do now. Because, it's funny because some of these organizations, they don't want to bug me, and they feel like they're bugging me. So I'm like, yeah, don't worry. And then whatever I find difficult, I just give it to my wife.
Right.
And so like we're on the Richmond Hospital Gala, which is once a year, but it's a lot of work. So the both of us are on it, and usually they approach me, and then I said, "Oh, it's a package deal." So so my wife's involved with that. You know, it's pretty funny, and you know, yeah, it's a package deal now. So I find it's hard. Like it's tough to say, but it's easier for me because she does all the tough, the paperwork and all the tough stuff, and you know, and I just show my face and get headlines in the newspapers. But no, all jokes aside, like we love giving back.
Yes.
You know, we're in a good position to, and we're thankful because we were kids and we grew up in this community, so we know what it's like to, you know, want to be involved with sports and this and that. So we don't want to have it where, you know, if a kid can't afford something, you know, them to miss out. So we definitely are involved.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing that you do that sort of work, and I'm sure that everyone's so grateful in the community. And something very interesting that you said was like you didn't have as much of that growing up, and so you want to give back. Yeah,
I think, you know, when people ask me like, you know, why, you know, you don't really have an answer, but that's probably the main thing is you know, when you don't have something and you know, then you go through it and you say, hey, you know, if one day I make it, I think that's what it was, you know, and one day I make it, I'll be a mentor and I'll help out kids, you know, which I've done. And I think that's probably the biggest thing.
That's amazing. Yeah, because I guess it can go one of two ways. You can get resentful about, you know, not having those things and go down that path, or you can. I
mean, I don't know if you really, you know, you're resentful. I mean, you make do with what you got, right? I mean, it's at the end of the day, it is what it is. You know, I had, you know, caring parents, you know, and you know, growing up, we didn't have everything, but you know, they tried, and just as long as the effort's there and people are caring for you, I mean, what else can you do?
And you know, those values you talked about from your parents, they are timeless. You know, no matter what the circumstance situation is. And it sounds like that really helped you out, growing up. And yeah, I know a lot of people probably want to hear about your career a little bit, and I'm sure you've talked about it so much on so many forums. You're the only professional football player in history to win the Super Bowl, the XFL, and the Grey Cup, which is the CFL. And, it'd be easy to assume that the Super Bowl is the biggest highlight of your career. But what do you cherish most about your pro football career?
It's safe to assume that, but I used to have a professor at the University of Hawaii that says, when you assume, you spell out, you make an ass out of you and me. I sound like an old man now.
Exactly,
but,
yeah. I totally agree.
I would say the Grey Cup, obviously growing up here and just being a huge fan, the BC Lions and the CFL. Obviously, when I was in high school and stuff, my mind was on NFL because that's what you see, the big money, this and that. So, it was great, great winning the Super Bowl. But, growing up here and having CFL and CFL roots and playing in the CFL for 8 years, that probably meant the most to me, especially in BC. I was drafted by Calgary, and then thankfully Wally came over here and he brought me with him. But, playing for BC, was a dream come true. And then winning we lost my first year, we lost on my birthday. And then the next year we were 10-0 and then end up choking. So I was like, then I felt like it was never going to happen. So in 2006, when it happened, it was, it was emotional and it was fun. And that was probably what meant the most, not to take away from, obviously everybody knows the Super Bowl, not so much the XFL, which was Vince McMahon's league. That was fun too. We had training camp in Vegas and I played for LA. So, couldn't go wrong in both places. We had a veteran O-line coach. So we had a good team. So, if we practiced well, he was like, all right, in 2 days in training camp is usually what's hell. And we had such a veteran group that we would practice once and he'd be like, all right, see you at lunch. And so it's like, when I could tell you that when I got the call that the CFL or XFL folded, it felt like, like breaking up with a girlfriend or like, heartbroken.
That's so
because,
funny.
Because it was, and the business side of it was 10 weeks. I made 6 figures and I played football in California. So it was like, it was so nice. So when that, that's why my heart was broken because it was like everything was falling in place. It felt so easy. I know it's not easy, but it was like, it just felt right. But, each league obviously has their qualities. The NFL is obviously the top and the best in the world. And not to take away from St. Louis and my experience there because it was unbelievable. But my roots are obviously Vancouver, BC Lions, and that's probably what meant the most.
Awesome. That's such a great insight into what the player feels versus what you see on paper. That's awesome. And you mentioned you were in Calgary. I wonder what it would have been like to win with them. Would it be bittersweet? I have a lot of family in Calgary, and I know the rivalry is huge, BC and Alberta.
I mean,
I don't know if it runs with.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Wherever you win and whatever your team. It does. Don't get me wrong. If I would have won when I was with the Stampeders, it would have meant the world because it's you're with that team. It's not like I wasn't playing for Calgary and saying, I wish I was in BC. No, I wanted, when I was a Stampeder, I wanted to crush the Lions.
Absolutely.
It's just the mentality you have. The crazy part for me was, I think I had just a knee surgery and Wally was trying to get me to come to Calgary. And he said, hey, come for the last bit of the season. Just practice, get on the team, learn the system for the next year. And I sort of said, no, he got mad. And he sort of just hung up the phone and they actually went on a run and won the Grey Cup that year. So
right.
the crazy thing was they won. Yeah. So Calgary won the year I got there or year before I got there. And then I still remember calling the GM and say, I'm contemplating retirement. And so they drafted a couple O-linemen and they released me, I think, 2 hours before training camp started.
Wow.
So it was like, it's a business. I look at it now as a business. I was pissed because everybody's got the roster full, and I think I signed with Winnipeg halfway through the season, and Calgary ended up winning the Grey Cup that year too. So I sort of kicked myself. Yeah, I sort of kicked myself because I could have had 2 more Grey Cups in between, but it is what it is. It's a funny story now, but that's just sports for you.
Well, it made the eventual victory so much sweeter.
Yeah, at that time, no, it didn't, because you want to win everything. But no,
got it.
Your ups and downs definitely make definitely your downs make the ups feel so much better, especially in sports.
Gotcha. Yeah, you mentioned Wally. Was he your coach?
He was, yeah, definitely. He drafted me in '99, and then I played for him in 2001, 2002, and then I played with him for 3 years in BC. Got it.
And you're pretty close with him.
Yeah, he's a legend. I mean, he's the real deal. Like, it's, he's the reason. Like, if you look at what he did in Calgary and then he comes to BC, there's no fluke, right? And just, it's just, you learn so much, just not from just about football, but in life, because we have so many team meetings, and so, you're together so much, and he's like a second father. And so, the funny thing was, Wally, when you played for him, he was strict and hard. But now when you see him in retirement, it's like, it's a father. Like, it's, you smile, you laugh, and you see what he's doing. It's like a tough dad. It's not that you hate your kids. You're trying to mold them and make them men. And so that's totally how he coached. And that's why, if you look at players that played for him, during the time, you're like, oh, I can't, like this, he's tough and you can't stand him. But then when you go back now, and I guarantee you 99% of the players that say, talk about him will say how much they love him and how much he's meant to him. And that's what mentors and father figures do, right? It's funny because, I was lucky to play for him, and actually Dan Durazio, old line coach, are very similar. So, he's worth his weight in gold, definitely.
Right, yeah, it's striking that balance between pushing the players hard enough, but also being that father figure.
100%.
And that's a rare quality, right?
It is. I think most coaches have it because, coaches get into the business, they love football or whatever sport they're coaching, and they got to love, being around and coaching and teaching and mentoring. So, the fake ones usually fall through the cracks and get out of there. The legendary ones that stick around that you hear about, they're doing something right. If you look at, like, I just watched a Netflix thing with Chicago Bulls and Phil Jackson. It's the same thing. Like, the good quality coaches and mentors have sort of the same almost Zen sort of, like, they don't have to say something, but they look at you and you're like, either crushes you or gives you motivation. Wally has that same kind of quality.
Got it. Yeah, I've been watching that series too. It's amazing, right? The Last Dance with the Chicago Bulls. It's awesome. That time they go into Phil Jackson and that Zen element that he brought out. I guess you've played in Hawaii and Oregon and Vancouver. That whole part of the world has this real nice balance between super competitive and Zen like qualities. It's a very interesting part of the world, I think.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, I think the Zen is definitely, not during the game.
yeah, of course.
It's and I coached a lot. I coached my son, and the one thing you have to teach is it's gotta be a switch. And like my older son had, like, he's not playing anymore, but he had it, but he didn't have, like, he had on all the time. So, like, I'm like, you can't act like that in school. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think the good ones that can turn it, the good ones that can turn it off, and then, like you said, Zen, and sort of get into that, and, and then, turn it on when you need to. I think those are the ones that are successful and go the distance. Because, it's if you're on all the time, you're going to drive yourself crazy because you can't do that, right? there's such a fine line yet too, right? It's like I've seen so many talented players that didn't make it, just because they're missing one little quality, and that's what you gotta sacrifice so much. You gotta just it's so tough to make it, and it can drive you nuts. But you gotta know when to turn it on and when to turn it off.
Oh, totally. And I mean, at that level, the margins are so tiny, like you say. What was the most challenging part of being a pro football player?
It's just everything. I don't know. It's at that age, I think it's just discipline, and I think you got to have a good support team too. Because I think when I was in St. Louis in training camp and you're just away from everything, and it's you wake up at 6 a.m. and go to bed at 10, and it's nothing but football. I still remember telling my wife, I feel like quitting, and she'd be like, "Yeah, you should quit." And after I'm telling her, you can't say that to me. It's tough. And she didn't. I think we were dating like that, or we were not married at that time, but we were almost married. We're together 2 or 3 years, so she was just getting. I'm with her 21 years now, but. So I had to teach her, and then fast forward like 3-4 years, I'm in training camp, and I'm like, oh, I hate this sucks, and she's like, suck it up. And so it's like she learned, she's the opposite then. She's like, suck it up, it's only me too. So it's funny how it turned around, but you need that, because your mind will play tricks on you, even though I would never quit. I just say that stuff maybe because I wanted sympathy and stuff, but that was probably the hardest, just being away from your family. It definitely got tougher when I had kids. Because you're always with them, and the crazy part was like I'd go to training camp, and then they'd go on a cruise to like Alaska or something, so they're having fun, and I'm here busting my butt, right? But that's probably when I had kids, it was probably when I started missing that. It's all tough. I mean, it's mentally draining, physically draining, but it's what you sign up for, right? And I think training camp is probably the hardest part of football. Anybody will tell you that. And the rest is, it's tough all the way through, but that's probably hell. And then if you get through that, you're in good shape. Yeah,
gotcha. And you mentioned the mental side as just like everything's tough. And then the mental side, I guess, when you're playing at that level, one interesting thing I think about sometimes is, you get the exposure to fame, you got a ton of money, all that, and then the line between temptation and discipline can derail a lot of players. I think that's something, a lot of communities of players coming up, people in countries like Fiji, which actually, punches well above its weight when it comes to sports, maybe doesn't necessarily have that infrastructure or that much exposure to fame and money all the time, and so when players can get exposed to that, it can derail them sometimes. How do you keep a level head in those situations when you like coming up through the ranks, you're getting exposed to a bit more fame and a bit more money?
It's honestly tough. You just got to focus, and it's tough to say, but you just got to you got to go back to what your original goals are and what you're trying to do, right? I mean, it's tough, but I mean, it's not like you got to be a prude and not go out. Cause I mean, I think to be a team player, you definitely got to spend time with your teammates, and I think every team that I've been a part of that's been successful, and we've had an off-field relationship too. So like, whether it was, barbecues in my house, it's got to be social, but it's just got to be controlled. And usually the guys that, my experience when I played was guys that had, had a family, those were more of the leaders, and I think more of the coaches wanted them to have, functions at their house or whatever, or lead the way, because they already knew, the coaches knew, or the head coaches knew where their mind was at. Regardless, you're always going to have youngsters, that are playing, and they're going to do what they're going to do. They're, nightlife and all that stuff. And I think for most veterans, everyone sort of goes through it. A first year, second year of a player, they get it out of their system. I think they realize, if you're going out to the club and you're partying every night, it shows in the field, right? And most guys that want to be successful, they might do it if they go out. They know they got the next 2 days off or a day off. and that's when they go out and hang out with the team. But I think you learn quick that, if you're out on the nightlife, your career's not going to be a lot long.
Got it. Yeah, because I mean, at that level, it really shows, right? Straight away, you can't hide.
No, 100%.
Unless,
you could be, I played with some guys. Sometimes the talent, you can get away with it. So I played with a couple guys that I don't know how they did it, but they could go out and drink, and then like next day nothing happened. It's like it baffles. But some guys can do it. I wasn't one of those guys. I think I had one experience when I was in Calgary, and I came back to Vancouver, and I went out. I got to leave early, so I went out like 2 days before. So I was happy to see all my friends. So we went out, and I'm talking like 2 days before the game. I might have had a few too many Crown and Cokes, but not the night before. I thought I prepared, but I had probably my worst game. And that's not coming back home is not what I wanted. So that was sort of my learning experience early in my career. The CFL was, I can have the pleasure, if I don't want to play football anymore, if I keep on playing like that, I probably would happen, or, stop the BS, focus on football, and then, I'll have plenty of time to do that when I'm retired. So I was lucky I had a lesson early in my career. And it wasn't even that bad, but it was like bad enough for me to, want to make something change.
Yeah, totally. The wake up call is important, and I just get lucky if it's early in your career, and you can take it the right way. You can learn from it, which is that's the way to do it, and like that really shows through from everything you've been talking about. And there are freaks out there. I just thought about Dennis Rodman from that series. But if you're growing up, if you're a young player in any sport, if you want to take that strategy that works for Dennis Rodman, which is like 1 in 100 million people kind of strategy, I don't think, that's not going to work out, right?
You can't say that with young guys, because like even my experience, what I just said, or you talk about Dennis Rodman, that's already at the pro level. So, for me, I didn't drink. I didn't have my first like drink. Until I was 24. I think my rookie year with St. Louis Rams. Right. And so, I was focused, and my senior year in college, I didn't even come home. I stayed in Portland, trained. So you have to make sacrifices. But, the stories that I'm talking about, even mentioning Dennis Rodman, is after he paid his dues. If you watch the story, how Dennis was clean cut before, and he got that way sort of after. And I think it's sort of, he paid his dues first. So you can't act like that. And that's the problem, I think, with some kids nowadays, is they see the stories, these guys are doing it, I can do it. Yeah, but they didn't see the 15 years before where they didn't touch anything and they worked hard to get there, and Michael Jordan's probably speaking of this, Michael Jordan's the best athlete, but, if you look at his interview, what he's got, nice scotch or something beside him.
That's right.
And I guarantee you when he was playing, he was not doing that. And that's why he was at that level. But now that he's retired, he deserves it and he can do it. And I'm not saying be a prude and I know kids are going to do what they're doing, but you got to stay focused on your goals. And I think the ones that do are the ones that succeed. Yeah,
that's an excellent point. You mentioned that it's very easy for young people to latch onto that bright and shiny story about like this guy, Dennis Rodman, look at him, he's great. But yeah, you're right. Like behind all that, what's the real story? And most of the time, if not all the time, they've paid their dues. I think that's the theme, right? 100%. Pay your dues.
And it's sort of, all this the social media and the way technology is now, it's almost a disadvantage for kids because you're getting into everybody's life. Like you get to see, what these professionals are doing, and half the time someone's, they're partying, right?
Yes.
So the youngsters want to do that, but they don't realize it took them 10, 15 years to get to that. And, you might see, like I said before, it's rare where you've got someone that can party and still play, but you do have those cases. But, you might see one guy partying like, once a month, but that's nothing in the grand scheme of things if he's already put in his dues and he's playing 10 years pro. the youngsters, they got to realize that it's not like that. It's alcohol and drugs are probably the worst thing to put in your body as an athlete.
Oh yeah.
It's the worst thing. Like if you want to shorten your career and maybe not even have a professional career, that's what you got to get into. And it's unfortunate. That's the way you got to say it.
Yeah, totally. That's unfortunate. Yeah, it is because it's so easily accessible, which is a real problem. And in all communities, it doesn't discriminate. It's a big issue in like a country like Fiji or somewhere developed like Canada or the States. It doesn't discriminate. I guess to find a way through that, I mean, it's very hard, I guess. Keep focused. Having a support system around you is always important. And yeah, just it's not easy sometimes to get out of there.
It's not. I think you said it right. You got to have a support system around you, or there's always got a best friend or someone. I had a best friend growing up that was my rock, and I could talk about everything. And you got to have somebody, and it doesn't always have to be family, because your friends and the people you trust, like they're not, doesn't have to be blood. I have some of my closest who I say are my family. They're not even related to me. People that I've hand chosen as my friends. That's what I think. So you need that. I probably got 5 friends around that I consider like family. That you got to be able to tell them everything, and like I've had friends 20, 30 years that I know them well enough that they're not going to judge you. They're not you can tell them everything, and so having a support system like that, a brother or sister is crucial, and in anything, I think.
Oh yeah, totally. Like in anything, I think.
And you gotta have someone that's honest too, right? Because I mean, you don't want a yes man or whatever they call them. Someone that always agrees, because a lot of my friends, they don't care who you are. Like they'll tell you the truth, and you don't want just a yes man around all the time. So it's like
totally.
Yeah, your real friends will tell you the truth no matter what, and that's who you got to keep around, whether you like it or not.
yeah, and I think that's hard for some people. They want to hear what they want to hear sometimes, and
exactly.
You need to cultivate that, and one way to do that is to be that person for your friends, right?
100%. 100%.
That's awesome. We've touched on so many things, your life experiences, values, principles. Yeah, one last thing I wanted to touch on, and I know we're running out of time, is nowadays you run a business, president of a commercial cleaning business, and, it's an interesting time right now in the world. And so I was just going to ask you what lessons, values, principles, and you probably mentioned most of these already, but what values, principles are guiding you through this time right now?
You're right. Like everything that I've always spoken, it's the same thing. Like I always say, like it's funny. Like it's just, for me, nothing's really changed except for the kids are around more. For me, and it's like, and I like that. Like it's but in these crazy times, in the cleaning business, yes, I've had a few contracts that have paused. But I've also had a couple that are 3. So for me, business wise, it hasn't changed, but just shows you that maybe, just in life in general, we just got to slow down a little and appreciate the fine things. Cause I like having my kids around. It's sort of nice right now to slow it down and appreciate, the things that we grew up appreciating. It's I know it's tough because, people are to work, some people are to work, and I hope wherever they're at, the government is trying to help them out.
Yes.
And I think there's enough support system out to get everybody through this, but you just got to make the best of the situation. I think, for me, it's slowing down and hanging out with the family, and
yes,
appreciating the smaller, things that we take for granted. And it's nice to enjoy that and just to relax and sort of slow down a little. You know what I mean? It's
Totally.
nice to have that, even though we want to be back in the hustle and bustle of things, but I'm enjoying it because I know, sooner or later we're going to be back to normal.
Totally. There's a real big theme of being present and slowing down and see what's in front of you.
Yeah.
Being grateful and, you talked about gratitude. I think it's an opportunity, for a lot of people to do that and maybe take that with you after this period as well. Those things are timeless. And so
100%.
Yeah. And we've talked about a lot of things. What are you most excited about in the next year or so?
That's tough right now because I'm excited just to go to a restaurant and eat. I don't know. Like,
I know.
It's a funny question right now because everything is so out of the ordinary, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, I just think I'm doing some business with some guys, with my buddy that coaches for the Vikings,
Nice.
and his friend in Denver. So it's sort of good timing because can't really get into too much, but it's online. It's online sports for every group. So obviously they do in football already, being the NFL.
Uh-huh.
They got 5 NFL coaches. So I was given the opportunity, obviously, because Mark Uyama is a Richmond guy. He's head strength coach for Minnesota Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm sort of channeling other sports and people that I know in the community. Actually, because Vancouver runs some really good programs.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've talked to Pasha Baines, who's a local guy. He's got a great drive basketball program. We've got Martin Nash, who's Steve Nash's brother.
Uh-huh. Wow.
We're working on soccer with him.
Mm-hmm.
Talking to my cheerleading coach, my daughter's cheerleading coach. So it's like, we're sort of bringing this sort of new age, but not new age because we've been working on it for 2 years. So that's sort of what I'm excited about, just doing some tech stuff. And
oh, that's very cool. Yeah, I know it's a funny question to ask right now. So Bobby, thanks so much. I've got some last questions for you that we ask all our guests. So number 1 is, what's your favorite food from Fiji?
From Fiji, just aloo gobi. Is that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh-huh.
That's probably that's all obviously roti too, but I mean, that's my probably my go-to.
Your go-to.
When I'm at my parents' house.
Nice.
Some other stuff too, but I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't want to look like food.
All right. A lot of people like seafood. A lot of the seafood, crab.
Yeah, I mean,
duck curry.
I'm 300 pounds. And I didn't get this weight by saying food.
Good answer. I like that one. I don't know if any of the other guests will be able to say that. Would you recommend kava to a friend?
I think you got to try it once at least, and let them have that, either that crazy look in their eyes, like, oh, what is this? Or not bad. And I think 90% will have that crazy look in their eyes.
I agree. Totally.
Yeah.
It's a crazy thing. Last question to wrap up. What's one thing you would tell a 10-year-old kid from Fiji?
Dream big. Dream big. At 10 years old, that's all you got. I think, you got so many rules and you got to listen to your parents, obviously. But, besides following, the rules and listening to your parents and going to school, it's just dream big because, I always set goals and one of them was NFL and it was, and in the back of my mind, like, I don't know if that's going to happen, but it did because it was something that in the back of my mind or what I wrote down on my personal goals is something that I always had was professional football, NFL, CFL. And that was a big dream for me back then and it came true. So, when you live it, it's not as big, but if you keep on saying it to yourself, you're going to believe and you got it. You just got to dream big and believe and it will come true.
That's beautiful. And on that note, Bobby, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you, and I wish you all the best for everything coming up.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Awesome.
Okay,
Take care.
thanks, okay. All right. Bye-bye.